Welcome back. Now let's talk about climate issues. African nations came into this month's COP27 International Climate Summit in Egypt with high hopes. They may yet leave empty-handed. With the event taking place on the continent for the first time since 2016, it was dubbed the Implementation COP. But as the event comes to a close, little progress has been made in mapping out how rich nations will honor a promise to provide $100 billion in annual climate finance for developing nations. Neither has much ground been made on honoring a pledge to double funding for adapting to changing weather by 2025. Now, a proposal that Africa's special needs and circumstances be considered also didn't make it onto the agenda. There's also been consistent demands from Africa and other developing regions that a separate fund be created, but that demand has been resisted by the industrialized world, who would rather existing facilities be used. A decision, of course, that has left African delegates frustrated. And I want to talk to one of the African delegates right now. Sulaiman Arigbabu actually is still in Egypt and was there throughout the discussion on everything about the climate discussions now. He joins us from Egypt, I guess from that city of Sharm el-Sheikh. Sulaiman, thank you very much for joining us on the program. The conference is, well, essentially come to a close. So what did Africa gain from this?
Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me once again. Well, the conference has not come to a close. It's an extended negotiation. So as we speak, the conference is still going on at the COP Center. So the negotiations is still on because if the conference were to create a definition for failure, especially from the African and developing countries' perspective, because critical issues of climate financing, especially on adaptation, critical issues of special needs and circumstances recognition for Africa, the very important issues of developing, at least agreeing on a funding mechanism for loss and damage were issues that were not decided on, and we're going to be passed to COP28. So right now, the negotiation is still on as we speak. The African group of negotiators and some other, and we have the DEJI360 and China, which comprises of the African groups and some developing countries plus China, are still pushing strongly that at least some measure of decisions be taken here in Sharm el-Sheikh. And then we can say that there's been some movement beyond just talk. So right now, the atmosphere is not very nice. People are quite dissatisfied, but the negotiation continues. And
sticking point. What has been the sticking point?
The best of outcomes, but it is not over yet.
So what has been the sticking point, actually, especially on those issues that you mentioned? You know, for instance, loss and damage, the issue of climate finance. I mean, yes, financing, issue of adaptation financing as well. What exactly are the sticking points?
So it is money. Money is always the sticking point. And then, of course, the other issue is fossil fuel. But let's look at money. In 2009 in Denmark, in Copenhagen, there was an agreement that, okay, there's need to create a green climate fund. And so the discussion was improved upon in Mexico the following year. And the agreement is that, okay, when you have this green climate fund, it will mobilize $100 billion up to 2020 annually to support developing countries to follow a different path to their development and to deal with their immediate climate realities, especially adaptation. As we speak, nothing of that money, less than 15 billion in all, over the length of over 10 years, have been mobilized. Pledges have been made, not much of the pledges have been fulfilled. So that's the problem. And Africa is now saying that we don't even need this your $100 billion a year. Our needs goes beyond that. Africa is looking at over an amount close to 6 trillion to be able to deal with climate change, especially on the area of adaptation. And it's saying we need to move this money even to $150 billion a year. But even the 100 billion that was initially pledged has never come through. That is one. Of course, there are a lot of money that is pledged on bilateral levels. But we know the politics of some of these aids, especially from so-called development aid, which is what is being one of the principles when negotiating climate financing, especially in the context of developed countries paying their climate debt, is that this fund, there's a particular principle that this fund should be new and additional to development aid. So it's not that you change the money you are giving, you are helping to support on malaria and some other things. You now go and recapture it and call it some climate fund. So we have a lot of bilateral aid going on, bilateral pledges. Some are in terms of grants, some are in terms of commercial finances, but over time that. But the main issue is that you have climate debt. The whole convention, the UNFCCC convention, which is out of the World Summit, is that in 1992 in Rio, is that there are climate debts that are owed. If all of us will go the dirty path to development, we'll crash the world. So there are some people that follow this path and they have made a lot of money, they have built the economy, and so they have historical debt, they have climate debts to pay. And they should help the rest of us not to follow that same path. So there are some principles that are being violated. Kyoto Protocol was meant to address some of that, but because the United States was not ready, Kyoto Protocol was eventually jettisoned. Then we went to Paris in I guess that was 2015, at the COP21, where, nations then agreed to all contribute to mitigation, because either mitigation has not really been the focus for Africa because we have not really contributed much to the greenhouse gases that is causing all of this emission, all of this global warming. And at that, when we all agree to nationally determined contributions to emission reduction, it is on the basis that you are going to support us to meet these obligations. But the finances is not coming. The technology transfer is not coming. Africa is just being made to contribute more without being given what it will require in terms of things. So finance is at the heart of the issue. When it comes to the issue of loss and damage, what Africa and the group of 77 countries are saying is that, look, some countries, for some people, it is already late. For some communities, it is already late. So loss and damage, when you look at the kind of flooding that Pakistan and Nigeria experienced recently, for some communities, they will never be able to recover. So loss and damage, for this year, we are saying, let's have a funding mechanism, because through this funding mechanism, it will be different from the either funding mechanism for some of the funds like adaptation and GCF, where it became difficult for African countries to access this fund. But that a funding for loss and damage will be a fund that recognizes that the people who are demanding loss and damage, every minute counts for them, every second counts for them, to prevent loss of lives and water, because they have already experienced disasters that is beyond them. So these are some of the fine issues. Then there is the issue on fossil fuel. I personally think that the issue of fossil fuel is something that is really tricky for everybody, both for the developing countries and for Africa, because we have new African fossil fuel countries who have discovered coal, who have discovered gas, and who are saying we are going to explore this to our benefit. And now the European countries are supporting that because they have also faced energy challenges due to the crisis in Russia and Ukraine. The civil society organizations are saying that means that we are going to further pollute the world. That means we are going to further heat up the world, and people are going to further suffer. And you are not providing the kind of support that they need, to go through some of the extreme climate circumstances that they are going to be facing. So these are some of the tough issues. But of course, you have countries like the United States who are saying, no, there's no issue of providing another funding mechanism for loss and damage, because they know that they are the biggest polluters, and they are going to have the biggest responsibility to provide some of the funds being required. So it's a matter of, I don't want to give money, I need you to give money because you owe a debt. So the negotiation hasn't really gone the way that Africa would have loved it to go.
All right, we'll wait and see what the outcome of the ongoing negotiation would be, but it's beginning to look like the negotiation will be carried forward to probably COP28, because that has been the pattern for quite some years now. We just wait and see what happens. But all the same, Sulaiman Arogabu, Executive Secretary of HEDA Resource Center, thank you very much for joining us on the program, and thank you for your time. Well, that's how much we can take on the program, actually. We'll see you again next week. Until then, bye-bye.